Welcome, my friends, to Winsloe United Church on beautiful Prince Edward Island. Thanks so much for tuning in and making us part of your worship experience for this week. Now, folks, last Christmas, my beautiful wife, Ruth, had our Sunday school sing this song. Hey, hey, anybody listening? Hey, hey, anybody care? Hey, hey, anybody listening? Anybody there? Have you ever felt like that? You know, when your bad day turns into a bad week, a bad month, a bad year? Or how about when you're leaving your doctor's office, or the mortuary, or your lawyer's office? Or how about you're picking up the newspaper or turning on your TV and you hear about the latest political scandal, the latest murders, or perhaps those increasing COVID rates? And you wonder, is anybody listening? Does anybody care? Is there anybody there? Well, folks, that's what we're going to be talking about today. And so, I hear Stephanie playing. I see people coming. So, without further ado, let's praise the Lord. In the beginning was the Word. And the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the very beginning. In Him was life. And that life was the light to all mankind. And that light shone in the darkness. And the darkness has no overcome. And so, my friends, on this day, when the light of Christ begins to shine, so let the word of God echo forth for all to hear. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding. And then the people of God will say together, Amen. And if you ever wonder, when we try to put these services together, we have the light of Christ shine, the word of God spoken, and then songs of angels lifting praises to God. My friends, as you go throughout your life, as you're in your home and you're going through life and you wonder, does anybody ever hear you when you speak? Now, ladies, let's just say you're out in the kitchen and you need some help, and you call, George, I know you're in watching the Leafs lose to Montreal. Can you come in and help me? And then there's silence, and you wonder, did he hear me, or is he just pretending? Or gentlemen, you know, your wife's busy working away, and you call, you know, can you come in and give me a hand? and then there's nothing. And you wonder, does she love me? Is she just spending too much time making pumpkin pie that she didn't hear me call her? I really need some help. Well, folks, as we go through life, quite often we're like that. We say, Lord, can you hear me? I'm struggling here. I need your help, and I need it today. If you've ever been in that situation, I know, my friends, I know I have. That's what we're going to be talking about today. Now, when Jesus Christ came to this world, he spent his time going out on the highways and byways in the countries and in the cities, anywhere that people would gather and hear, whether it be in the fields, whether it be by the Sea of Galilee, whether it be in the synagogue, whether it be in the streets, whether it be to people who considered themselves saints, to whether there was people that considered themselves sinners. He came. And he came and he preached the good news of the kingdom of God. And then, when he couldn't be here in the flesh to do that, he had already made arrangements. He had apostles come and follow him and learn from him. And they learned many lessons, the greatest of which happened at the cross. And so then they went out, and they taught generation after generation of people who were just like us, going through life and wondering, Lord, are you with me? I need you. They taught him a creed, basic tenets of the faith that were passed down from generation to generation, from Christ's teachings to his disciples, to the church, and through the church and the Bible to us here today. And so on this day, as we gather in this place that we call the house of God, and as we saw the light and the word and the music of God, so let us come to God with the words of faith that help bring us to this place here today, as we say together our creed. I believe in God the Father Almighty, creator of heaven and earth. I believe in Jesus Christ, God's only Son, our Lord, who was conceived by the Holy Spirit, born of the Virgin Mary, suffered under Pontius Pilate, was crucified, died, and was buried. He descended to the dead, and on the third day he rose again. He ascended into heaven, and he is seated at the right hand of the Father, and he will come to judge the living and the dead. I believe in the Holy Spirit, the Holy Catholic Church, the communion of saints, the forgiveness of sins, the resurrection of the body, and life everlasting. Amen. Now, folks, when Jesus taught, sometimes he just preached sermons. You know, we have that Sermon on the Mount that we talk about. Sometimes he used wise sayings. And sometimes he used stories, parables and stories that had a truth that once planted in your fertile imagination, once planted in the soil of your soul, will grow up and show the truth of God. And if you ever wonder why sometimes I tell stories, it's not because I want to glorify anybody or myself. It's just to point to the one who's the author of all our stories, Jesus Christ. Now, folks, when I was at university, I met this guy by the name of John Michael MacDonald. And he was from the Shetland Islands off the north coast of Scotland. And we became, pretty good friends, and we would hang out together. And one day, we were talking, and I said, well, geez, what's it like over in Shetland? And he said, well, he would tell me, and he said, my father is a fisherman, and my mother, she makes cardigan and wool sweaters. Now, at first, his mother only did it for John and his father and a few of their buddies, but I guess she was good at it, and it kind of grew. And things expanded, and all of a sudden it became a nice small business that employed, a couple of dozen people. Now, her gimmick, or the gimmick of her company, was that they did everything, and it was all from Shetland. They had sheep that they, raised for wool. They spun the wool, they dyed the wool, they made the sweaters. And I said, well, what's your job in all this, John? And he said, well, I look after the sheep. Now, according to John, they didn't eat any of the sheep. They were strictly there for their wool. Now, I didn't know anything about, sheep at the time. I married my wife, Ruth. She had, 80 sheep at one point in time, so I got to learn a little bit more about that. Usually what I learned is I'll let you look after it, and I'll just stay over here and stay out of the way. But I said to him, do you like the job? And he said, oh, yeah, I love it. I love spending time with the animals and being out in nature and everything. I love the outdoors. I said, was there anything you hate about it? He said, yes, I do. You see, once a year we put the sheep in this big vat full of chemicals. Now this sanitizes them. Otherwise they'd be eaten alive with all the bugs and parasites that are around. And it's always a fight. They know what's happening and they fight against us all the time. They run away, they baa, they panic. It's terrible. Now, we're doing it for their own good to keep them healthy and well. But it's always a fight. And then we have to shear them. And again, they hate it. It's always a big fight. If we left it on there, they might, they're not that active. They're not going to wear it off like, say, wild sheep would. But we have to do it. We need it for our business, but it's good for them too. And yet it's always a fight. They hate it. And you know what? All I ever do is look after them and care for them. I feed them. I look after them. If they get lost, I go looking for them. If they get sick, I look after them. I try to make them well. I protect them. And yet this is always a fight. And again, I'm just looking out for them. I don't understand. I don't understand. And you know what? I understand that they're sheep. They don't understand all things about chemicals. But all I'm doing is after a lifetime of looking after them, you would think they would trust me enough to know that whatever I'm going to do for them is in their best interest, and I'm only looking after them. And that kind of stuck with me until today. Because, we have someone in our lives just like that. And his name is Jesus Christ. And he came to earth to teach us, to love us, to guide us, to inspire us. He came to teach us about God, about his love and mercy, how there's a place, that in our Father's house there's many rooms, that there's one there for us. He came to this earth to live for us, and to die for us, and to live again for us, so that one day we can inhabit one of those many rooms in our Father's house. And yes, there are things that we don't understand about God. It requires faith. But instead of focusing on the things that perhaps we don't understand, perhaps we should look at and focus on the things that we do understand about God. That he loves us, that he cares for us, and that he's active and working in our lives here today. My friends, he is the Good Shepherd, and he will guide us through the valley of the shadow of death, to those green pastures and still waters, if we are smart enough and trust him enough to follow. And folks, that's just a little message I leave with you here today. Now, when we were going through and going through our Apostles' Creed, one of the phrases, and in my mind is one of the greatest phrases, in there is that we believe in the forgiveness of sins. And that's a powerful statement, because it tells us a whole lot about God, about our relationship with God, that our life here on this earth. And what it tells us is that we don't have to be perfect, that God didn't make us this way. He wants us to get better and better, sure. But just because we stumble and fall doesn't cut us off from the love of God. That we can come to him with those sharp edges of our lives. We can come to him with those things that are broken in our lives. And that that we can talk with him and that he will hear us and forgive us. It also teaches us about the mercy of God and the grace of God. There's nothing that we can do to earn it, but it's there. There's nothing that we can do to deserve it, because it is there. What it tells us is that he loves us so much that he'll do whatever he can to open those doors, to teach us these lessons, and to bring us home. And with that thought now, let us come before God with our prayer of confession, and let us pray together. Lord Jesus, we travel here to your house to praise you. Yet when we leave this place, we fail to recognize you acting in our homes. Sometimes fear and doubt causes us to turn away from you, from what you taught us to be true. Forgive us, we pray. Remind us again of your holy presence hovering near us and in us. Replace our fear with faith and trust so we can live honestly and act courageously in this your world. Amen. And Lord Jesus, I now ask that you hear the confessions of all here who seek you and who may truly need you this day. Here now are secret sins and shames that we can share with nobody else, but we know we can share with you. Be assured. Be assured that this day the Lord has heard you. Be assured this day the Lord has forgiven you. Thanks be to God. And amen. The good Lord has given us eyes to see, ears to hear, and a mouth to praise the Lord. He's given us a life and love to share. Let us come before that God now with the gift that only we can give. Our offering will now be accepted.
Jesus, he came to seek to give back to God a small measure of what we've received, let us also give back to God the prayer God gave to us to say together. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. And give us this day our daily bread. And forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen.
Now, my friends, today we're going to have, our scripture reading is from the book of Habakkuk. And if you say, J.D., you're pronouncing that wrong, I can tell you that I'm not, because nobody knows how to pronounce it. Habakkuk is a word that came from a different language and a different culture. They named this child after this word, but that culture died out. So nobody knows how it's pronounced. So, I can pronounce it any old way, and I'll still be right, or still be wrong, but no one will know the difference. So there we go. There's this great and mighty empire. It was the world's only superpower at the time. And it fixed its eyes on Jerusalem, on Israel. And it came to conquer. And it wasn't a fair fight. Remember the Britain and Falklands fiasco? It was something like that. It was something that was going to last a matter of days. It wasn't a fair fight. And he came, and unlike today, where, we have mechanized weaponry, we can press a button and cruise missiles can go over and land pretty much anywhere in the world in just a matter of a few hours. In order to bring a massive army, would take years to go from one place to another. They don't be able to walk maybe a couple of miles a day. So it would take years to get to the right spot to do the conquering. And so in that time, here's a small country, a walled city. They know this massive army is coming, and they have all this time to worry and dread and fear. And Habakkuk is one of the first prophets to cry out to God and ask for help. And in this, you're going to hear Habakkuk asking God, for things. Then God actually answers in a way that Habakkuk can understand. And then we have Habakkuk being his response to God. And that's what we're going to hear today. How long, O God, must I call for help, but you do not listen? Or cry out to you violence, but you do not save? Why do you make me look at injustice? Why do you tolerate wrongdoing? Destruction and violence are before me. There is strife and conflict abounds. Therefore the law is paralyzed, and justice never prevails. The wicked hem in the righteous, so that justice is perverted. And then God speaks. Look at the nations and watch, and be utterly amazed, for I am going to do something in your days that you would not believe even if you were told. I am raising up the Babylonians, that ruthless and impetuous people who will sweep across the whole earth to seize dwellings that are not their own. They are feared and dreaded people. They are a law unto themselves and promote their own honor. Their horses are swifter than leopards, fiercer than wolves at dusk. Their cavalry gallops headlong, their horsemen come from afar. They fly like eagles, swooping to devour. They all come intent on violence. Their hordes advance like a desert wind and gather prisoners like sand. They mock kings. They scoff at rulers. They laugh at all the fortified cities by building earthen ramps to capture them. Then they sweep past like the winds and go on. Guilty people whose own strength is their God. And then Habakkuk says back to God, Lord, are you not from everlasting? My God, my Holy One, you will never die. You, Lord, have appointed them to execute punishment. You, my rock, have ordained them to judge. And may God bless to us our reading and our interpretation of this God's holy word. Amen. It would be very easy to go to church for many decades and never hear a sermon on Habakkuk. In fact, this book is so obscure that no one really knows how to pronounce the name, Habakkuk. Why? Because Habakkuk was a name that was borrowed from another language and culture that has since disappeared. And so no one really knows how to even say this guy's name. So if you're watching this sermon and say, geez, he doesn't even know how to pronounce this guy's name, well, the answer is, you're probably right. But then again, nobody else does either. Now, Habakkuk, it's only a short book in the Old Testament. It's only 3 chapters long. And so if you wanted to read it, it'd probably take you about a half an hour or so. However, even though it's a very obscure little book, it's very relevant to us here today. Because Habakkuk asks the question, where are you, God, when we're going through tough times? Where are you, God, when we're going through evil times? And folks, with COVID-19 running rampant through our beautiful province, through our nation, indeed through this world, with the potato and wart mess that we're living with, and all the things that come from COVID and that potato wart mess, things like farms shutting down, businesses shutting down, family breakup, the loss of hope, the loss of income, the loss of family, depression, maybe even suicide. Folks, we are living through some tough times. And dare I say, we are living through some evil times. And so, today I want to look at 4 things. Number 1, what Habakkuk saw. Number 2, what he did. Number 3, what he heard from God. And number 4, what it means to him back then and to us here today. So number 1, let's get started. What Habakkuk saw. So let's first take a look at verse 2 and 3. How long, Lord, must I call for help, but you do not listen? Or cry out to you, violence, but you do not save? Why do you make me look at injustice? Notice it says, why do you make me look at injustice? But the word injustice is, well, it's a pretty general word. It means evil or sorrow or grief. And what he's saying here is, Lord, why do you put me in a position where all I see is evil all the time? In Ecclesiastes 9, there's a very interesting verse that goes like this. As fish are caught in a cruel net, as birds are taken in a snare, so men are trapped by evil times that fall unexpectedly upon them. Now, folks, King Josiah, the king of Israel, he was a devout believer, and he was king of Israel just before Habakkuk was born. And he was a great king. He was kind, he was merciful, and he did lots of good and great things for his people and for Israel in general. He was possibly the greatest king since King David, and he gave the people hope. He gave the people hope that there might be good times coming for the country. But after he died, his sons became kings, and they were terrible kings. Josiah, he died in battle fighting against Egypt. And his sons, when they came to power, they just did whatever Egypt wanted them to do. And so there was moral corruption, and there was justice inside the society. And that's one of the reasons why Habakkuk says, in verse 4, that the law is paralyzed. God's law is not being obeyed. There were military threats outside, and there was injustice on the inside. Therefore, what you had were evil times. Threats from without, corruption within, evil times. Not only does he see all these terrible things happening in his country, he doesn't see God doing anything about it. How long, Lord, must I call for help, but you do not listen? Or cry out to you, violence, but you do not save? He's saying, Lord, why aren't you listening? Why aren't you listening to me? Why aren't you doing anything about all this? I can see it. You must too. Why do you tolerate all of this? Why do you let this happen? Why are you absent? Why have you abandoned us? And folks, that's why this small, obscure book of Habakkuk is so relevant to us here today. Ecclesiastes 3 says, there's a time for everything and a season for every activity under heaven. There's good times and there's evil times. They come and they go, like the tide, like the seasons. The thing is, though, we tend to think that when good times are here, that they're always going to stay that way. Happy times are here again. The sky above is blue again. Let us sing a song of cheer again. Happy days are here again. And we think that they're going to stay. In fact, we think things will always just get better and better. We might have a good year, we might have a bad year, but essentially, we assume that 10 or 20 years from now, that we'll be better off than we are today. That our children's life will be better than ours, that our investments will keep on going up, that the values of our home will basically go up and up and up. Things will basically get better and better and better. And folks, from 1870 to 1910 in North America and in Europe, that's how everybody felt. Good times. Good times are here, never going away. Things are going to get better and better and better. We might have a bad year, but basically, things are on the way up, all the way up. But the first part of the 20th century saw World War I, saw the Great Depression, saw World War II, we saw the Holocaust. And by the end of the 40s, thousands of people were starving to death every winter in Europe. Those were evil times. Decade after decade after decade of things not getting better, of problem after problem after problem. And we take a look at our world today. When we turn on the news, what do we hear and what do we see? We hear about the worldwide pandemic, hundreds of new cases each day in PEI, infections in our school, in our nursing homes, businesses worried about closing, the federal government spending and spending and spending like drunken sailors, trying to keep things afloat, but But there'll come a time when those debts have to be paid. And people are asking the same questions that Habakkuk asked back then. Lord, why aren't you listening? Why aren't you doing anything? Why do you tolerate this? Why do you let this happen? Why are you absent? Why have you abandoned us? So that's what Habakkuk saw. Evil times. He saw, or he thought he saw, not God not being there. God abandoning us. That's what he saw. And some of us think that we see the same thing here today. That we are seeing what Habakkuk saw. Evil times. And God not being here. That was the first point. Now the second. What Habakkuk did. To understand how Habakkuk responded, you need to see two things that he did. On one hand, he was bold. He was bold and he was honest. Take a look at verse 3. Why do you make me look at injustice? Why do you tolerate wrongdoing? Now, folks, this is pretty bold stuff. What he's doing here is he's challenging God. But in verse 12, he actually does something that is even more remarkable. It doesn't come out very well in English. In verse 12, he says, Lord, are you not from everlasting? Which means eternal or infinite. He says, are you not infinite? Now, in English, that doesn't sound all that confrontive. In fact, it sounds kind of wimpy. But in Hebrew, it's not a request for information. It's a punishing statement. And essentially, he's saying something like this. Lord, I thought you were infinite. I thought you were supposed to be this great, infinite, wise, everlasting, powerful God, but you're not. Either you don't have what it takes to save us, or you do, but you just don't care enough to save us. Imagine someone saying that to you. JD, you're supposed to be this great guy, but I don't see you doing anything. Maybe you can't. Or maybe you can, but you just don't care enough. Imagine your husband, or your wife, or your children saying that to you. Humbling, isn't it? And it shows that they're awfully angry at you. Now, folks, there's nothing like this anywhere else in the Bible. God is not being approached with courtesy and respect, no. Habakkuk is in absolute anguish, and he's crying out to God, why are you letting this happen? Why are you letting this evil and injustice reign? Look at my society. Look at your society. We are supposed to be your people. Look at Israel. We are supposed to be the promised land. You're supposed to be bringing salvation out of Israel to the rest of this world. But instead, it's all corrupt. All the time. It's a mess. Why are you letting evil and injustice reign in my nation and your nation too? And then God answers him. In verses 5 to 11, God says, I'm raising up the Babylonians. I'm raising up the most ruthless, bloodthirsty people this world has ever seen. And they're going to sweep down and across this world. And they're going to crush and conquer everything that they see. They're going to crush and conquer your country. And you might be thinking, did I just hear that right? Did God just say what I think he said? And folks, the answer is yes. And Habakkuk is stunned. And he says, you call that an answer? I just complained. Why are you letting evil and injustice reign? And your answer is, I'm going to send more evil and injustice. I'm going to send more violence and oppression upon your nation. That's what I'm going to do. And Habakkuk basically says, Lord, are you nuts? Lord, are you not from everlasting? I thought you were supposed to be an infinite and wise and powerful and loving God. Habakkuk is bold. He's intemperate. He's impertinent. He's angry, and he challenges God. That's the first thing that he does. But the second thing that he does after this rant is he prays. And here is the important point in all of this. If there's only one thing that you remember from this entire sermon, this is it. He is bold, he is impertinent, he is angry, and he challenges God, but he doesn't walk away from God. It never crosses his mind. It's not an option. It's not ever an option for him to walk away from God, to stop obeying God, to stop praying to God, to stop following God, to stop loving God. It's not an option. And you know why? He's angry. He's upset. He's in anguish. And he's confused. But notice how he's dealing with it. He's not, blogging about it. He's not writing about it. He's not even talking about it. He's praying about it. He comes to God with all his pain, and he lets God have it. Now, folks, I've been talking to people about God for years. I mean, that's my job. I'm a pastor. And I can tell you that almost nobody treats God like this. Now, some people, they say, oh, don't question God. And when they do that, I think they see God as this king or some big boss that you have to appease. And you better not say anything against him, or he'll hit you with a lightning bolt or something, or cause a pox on your house or something like that. And on the other hand, some people have this enormous confidence in their own perception and reason. And they say something like this: well, I don't see how a loving God would do this. I don't see how God could be bringing anything good out of this mess. I don't see why God is allowing this to happen, why he's allowing this suffering and evil to come about. Therefore, I can only imagine that there is no God. And so I'm not going to believe in him. They either, be quiet and try to put everything under the rug, or they walk away. Two ways that I generally see people dealing with God about evil times and tough times. But Habakkuk, as we see, does neither. He's not afraid to question. He doesn't bow and scrape, afraid of saying or doing something wrong. No. He's intellectually and emotionally frank. He's challenging. But on the other hand, he wouldn't ever think of leaving. I think this is what Habakkuk is saying. Lord, I wouldn't be upset if I thought that you weren't holy, but I know that you are. I wouldn't be upset if I thought that I could walk away, but I know that I can't. Because if I can't figure out life with you, how in the world am I ever going to figure out life without you? Where else would I go? You have the words of eternal life. And folks, that's why I'm so upset. Lord, I'm upset not because I think that I don't need you, because I know that I do. But I'm afraid, and I don't understand. Do you know why God doesn't smite Habakkuk? Do you know why God doesn't stop stop him talking? Do you know why God puts the prayer of Habakkuk in the Bible for us to read, these many centuries later? Why would God do such a thing? Are we supposed to pray like this? No. We shouldn't be talking to God like this. Well then, what are they here for? They're here because God knows how we feel and how we speak when we're desperate. And what God is telling us is, I remained Habakkuk's God. Not because he put on a happy face and pretended everything was okay. I remained Habakkuk's God even when he didn't do that. I remained his God not because he was perfectly emotionally in self-control, because he wasn't. I remained his God not because he was doing everything just right, because he wasn't. I remained in his life. I remained his God because of my grace, because of my relationship with him and my relationship with you. And that relationship is based not on your performance. It's based on my unconditional love for him and for you. Folks, your salvation is not based on doing everything exactly right. If that was the case, mine would have been shot 54 years ago. No. Your salvation is based on God's love for you. So knowing the grace of God, on one hand, gives you the freedom to ask and to question. But on the other hand, knowing the grace of God convinces you that there's no place except with God that you could possibly make it in this life. If you're going to make it in life, you're going to have to make it with God. So never leave. Never leave. Never leave his side. Habakkuk wrestled with all these things during evil and tough times. And he discovered that even though we're not perfect, that our God is a God of grace. He loves us. He will never turn his back on us. And he's always working in our lives to turn evil into good. And folks, that is how you deal with evil and tough time, knowing that God is there and that he is taking this evil and he's working it for good. Your good and the good of all the people that we love, our friends, our families, our neighbors. So that's what he saw, evil times. That's what he did to face evil times. So that brings us to point 3. What did he hear from God? God's first answer. Now I said that God answered Habakkuk. And here's how he began. Look at the nations and watch, and be utterly amazed. For I'm going to do something in your days that you would not believe, even if you were told. I'm raising up the Babylonians, the ruthless and impetuous people, and they'll sweep across the whole earth to seize dwellings not their own. I want you to see 2 things specifically in God's answer. Now, the first thing that he says is Habakkuk, I'm going to tell you something that you're not going to believe or understand. And then he says, I'm going to raise up the Babylonians, that ruthless and impetuous people who will sweep across this entire earth and take dwellings not their own. Habakkuk is asking, Lord, where's your salvation? And God's answer is, I'm going to bring even more injustice and violence into your life, and that's how I'm going to work my salvation in this world. And Habakkuk, I'm sorry. You're going to see it, but you're not going to understand it. Here's two things that you should learn from this statement. First, what God is saying is, Habakkuk, don't you dare judge me by your own timetables. Don't you dare judge me by your own measurements of time or your own calendars or your own motivations or beliefs. No. Habakkuk is crying out to God saying, Lord, I don't understand. You said that you were going to bring salvation out of Israel to this entire world, and yet here is Israel turning into this corrupt, awful thing. Come on, God, do something. And God says, Habakkuk, I am doing something. I'm going to raise up this terrible Babylonian empire. And they're going to come in, and they're going to conquer the Jews, and they're going to take them out of Jerusalem, and they're going to take them out of Israel, and they're going to take them away into exile. They're going to take them away into Babylon. And Habakkuk says, what? You call that an answer? And God says, well, I told you wouldn't believe me. Now, folks, Habakkuk didn't understand because he's a human person with a human life, with a human vantage point, and things are important at certain points in time. Habakkuk didn't understand because he was judging God on his own timetables, his own measurements of time, his own calendars. But here we are 2,500 years later. And because we're 2,500 years removed, we have a different vantage point to see what was going on and what happened. And we can see something that Habakkuk couldn't see. You see, if the Jews had never been defeated by the Babylonians and taken off into exile, they never would have spread throughout this entire world, and Jesus would not have been accepted by the people. Christianity might never have happened, at least not in the way that it did. So, let's take a look. Babylon defeated Judah. They broke down the walls of Jerusalem, and they took all the scholarly people, all the important people, the teachers, the priests, the accountants, all the young, strong people, and they took them off into exile in Babylon for 70 years. But then came along Cyrus the Great, the leader of the Assyrian Empire, and he defeated the Babylonian Empire, and when he did, he released the Jews to go back if they wanted, and he rebuilt Jerusalem. Now I said he allowed the Jews to go back to Jerusalem if they wanted. The thing is not very many people went back. It's been 70 years. Generations have died. People have married. They've buried their elders. They've raised new families. They now have a life, maybe a comfortable life, where they are. That place that was once a place of exile is now a place of home. So most of the Jews stayed in dispersion. They stayed in exile. And because of that, because the Jews didn't go home, every city in the ancient world now had synagogues. They now had Jewish people. And they had God-believing Gentiles, people who had been, born pagans, but they began to hear about God, they began to study God's Word, and begin to get interested in the God of Israel. In other words, they started getting converted to Judaism. And they started looking forward to this Messiah that was supposed to be coming. And when Christianity began to spread, And you can see this in the book of Acts, and you can read about it in the history books of regular history scholars, not just the Bible, but regular history scholars. They'll tell you this. The most receptive people in the entire world to the gospel of Jesus Christ, in the very beginning of the very Christian mission that we talk about here on a regular basis, were not the pagans who believed in their own gods. And it wasn't the Jews who, called for Jesus to be crucified. No. But it was the Gentile believers, the Gentile God-believing people who are now part of the synagogue communities, the people who were looking forward to the Messiah. And they embraced it. And it was through them that Christianity spread throughout this entire world. And folks, here's the great irony. I was just reading this book the other day, and it said that human sacrifice, the violent public spectacles like the Colosseum in Rome, infanticide, and slavery itself were things that everywhere in the ancient world were a complete given. Every human society at that time did all of them. But because the Babylonians came along and took the Jews off into exile, and then because the Greeks conquered the Babylonians, and then the rest of the world, Greek became the first universal language, the language that everybody knew and understood. So for the very first time, you could write a book like the Bible, and everybody in the world could understand it. And then the Romans came along and they conquered everybody, so that you could travel everywhere because everybody was controlled by Rome. And they built these roads. They built these roads so that they could send their troops out to conquer, and then the troops would be able to come back with spoils, like slaves and gold and grain and salt and all kinds of other luxurious items. They opened up trade routes. And because of that, people could go from place to place to place safely. And when they went safely, they brought themselves and they brought their beliefs with them, beliefs held in a book. And when they brought that book, like the Bible, with them, everybody could hear, read, and understand. So in other words, if this succession of dominant world powers hadn't taken place, if the Assyrians and the Babylonians and the Greeks and the Romans hadn't arisen, if Israel hadn't been defeated and brought into exile, Christianity never would have spread. And the violence of those great nations led to the spread of Christianity, which made all those nations less violent and brought the salvation of God to the four corners of this world. Do you think Habakkuk could have foreseen that? Do you think Habakkuk would have understood that even if he was told? I don't think so. Now, here's what I want you to know. When we look into this world and we say, Lord, I don't understand why this evil and suffering is happening, therefore I won't believe in you. What we're effectively saying is that this God who created us, this God who created the universe, this God who created life itself, can't be smarter than me, can't be wiser than me, can't have a different motivation or timetable than me. So instead of focusing on and getting hung up on the things that we can't understand about God, perhaps we should focus on and understand the things that we do understand about God. That He loves us, that He cares for us, that He's active and working in our lives. In fact, He loves us so much that He gave His blood for us. He gave His Son to bring us home. That God so loved the world that He gave His only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in Him should not perish, but have everlasting life. That's what Habakkuk saw. That's what he did. That's what God said. And what does it mean for us here today? What it means for us is simply this: that on the cross, he brought salvation out of judgment. He brought redemption out of violence and injustice. Jesus is saying to you, when you look at my death and resurrection, realize that dark times can come upon a person. It doesn't mean that God has abandoned you. Dark times can happen to people who don't deserve it. That's what happened to me. But I want you to know that there is a reason for everything God is doing. And someday, maybe not today, but someday, you'll know what it is. Until then, trust me, believe in me, look to me. And my friends, just like John Michael MacDonald in our other story, we have a good shepherd, and he will guide us through the valley of the shadow of death, to those green pastures, and to those still waters, if we just trust him enough to follow, to which I can only say, thanks be to God, and amen. Let's just bow our minds and hearts just for a quick moment in prayer. And loving God, we want to thank you for your church. We want to thank you for this chance to gather each and every week. And even though not all of us can come, even though some of us are nervous, still we find a way to reach out for people to hear. We want to thank you for the Bible. We want to thank you for a chance to hear your word. And we want to thank you that you are always with us. Even when we feel that you're not, we know that you are, that you will never leave us nor forsake us. So, Lord, on this day, we ask that you help us deal with these dark times and these uncertain times, whether they're social, whether they're widespread, or whether they just come to us as individuals. Give us the strength and courage to deal with them by looking to Jesus and remembering that the earth and heavens may pass away, but that your love for us will never pass away. That indeed, though we walk in darkness, you said that people who walk in deep darkness, on them a light has shone. In these uncertain times, allow us to look to that light, to the light of the world, knowing that you are active and working in our lives, that you work in us and others through the Spirit. Lord, these are the prayers of your people. And on this day, O Lord, hear our prayers. Amen. Well, my friends, again, I want to thank you for coming out and being part of our time here today. And whether you came here by yourself or with a friend, know that when you came here, you didn't come alone. When you leave here, you don't leave alone. The Spirit of the living God goes with you. And it's my prayer for you that wherever you go, whatever you do, whatever situation you might find yourself in, you're always able to see and feel the presence of the living God acting and working in your life, because he's there. Even when we can't be here, he is there. Now, my friends, as we seek to leave one another, go in peace, stay safe, and remember that God loves you, and so do we. To which I can only say, thanks be to God. And now may the grace, the mercy, and the peace of God the Father, God the Son, and God the Holy Spirit abide with each and every one of you this day and forevermore. Amen.
Well, my friends, we've pretty much come to the end of our time here together, and I want to thank you. I want to thank you for tuning in and making us part of your worship experience for this week. Now, folks, just because the good Lord isn't doing what you asked doesn't mean that he hasn't heard you. And just because the good Lord isn't acting on your schedule and your timetable doesn't mean that he isn't acting in your life, in this world, for you and everybody that you love. Now, folks, when we first started our service here today, I told you about that song our Sunday school sang last Christmas. Hey, hey, anybody listening? Hey, hey, anybody care? Hey, hey, anybody listening? Anybody there? But what I didn't tell you is that they weren't addressing that to God. That song was being directed at us. Now, folks, I know that life can be scary, and we are certainly living in uncertain times. But many years ago, an angel of the Lord came and he said, "Fear not, for behold, I bring you good tidings of great joy, which shall be for all people. For unto you is born this day in the city of David a Savior, who is Christ the Lord." He saw us. He heard us. He came. He was there. He loved us, and he will save us. Hey, hey, anybody listening? Hey, hey, anybody there? And you might be asking, how can I be there? How can I listen? Well, one way is coming right here to Winsloe United Church. Now, folks, our church is open. You've just been through a service. And so, if you've never ever been to church before, or you haven't been for a long time, please consider this to be your personal invitation to come right here to Winsloe United Church. Be there for God. Listen to him. Get to know your God. Get to know his family. Now, folks, I also realize that we're in the middle of a pandemic, and you might not be all that comfortable coming. And if that is the case, please keep tuning in, and always remember that God loves you. And so do we. And so, my friends, until we meet again, and we shall meet again, stay safe. May God bless you. Amen.